fadeaway with a hand in his face in the air for the win! Yes, sir! Garnett gives Minnesota the win at Target Center! Towns rebound, lets it fly, and Karl-Anthony Towns drills it at the buzzer! A catastrophic finish for the Grizzlies!
Welcome to the Everything's Coming Up Timberwolves podcast, your home for the best Wolves talk around.
Wiggins spots up there, deep three, he's got it! He scores it at the buzzer to give the Timberwolves the victory!
Welcome into another episode of Everything's Coming Up Timberwolves podcast. My name is Gabe Anderson, and as always, I am joined by Chris Emerson to talk some T-Wolves. Chris, how you doing?
Couldn't be better.
Good to hear it. Glad to hear it. And this week we are joined by Donover. There we go. Schrupp, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
Doing good. So definitely doing better than the T-Wolves. They obviously had a terrible showing against Memphis. Well, particularly in the fourth quarter. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, tonight's game, we're recording this on Friday night, the 15th. Tonight's game against the Memphis Grizzlies has been postponed because Karl-Anthony Towns got COVID. Just another thing stacked on to his terrible 2020 and so far 2021. So I want to start with this. Chris, do you think that the NBA season will come to a conclusion? Do you think we'll get through it, or do you think COVID's going to screw it all up?
You know, it's really up in the air, but I think it'll come to a conclusion of some sort. I mean, for them, how they handled it last year, where they went into a bubble for the playoff thing, it wouldn't blow my mind if something like that, or maybe even just regional bubbles, something happens. I just don't know how long they can continue with the way they're going right now. It seems like every night there's 2 to 3 games postponed. Sooner or later, that's going to pile up, and there's just not going to be enough days to make up all these postponements. So I don't know. They're definitely going to have to sit back and figure it out. But if any league can do it, it's the NBA. I think they're the best run league in sports.
I think so too. Donover, what do you think? Do you think that this season will come to a conclusion, or do you think COVID will screw up the plans?
I think it'll come to a conclusion. You can kind of look at the outline of how baseball did it. And granted, they're not as close as basketball is contact-wise, but you can really take away a lot of what they did, and maybe basketball can implement some of the same things. But I do believe they will come to an end this season.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, but like you were saying, I think because baseball made it, college basketball right now is making it. And so I honestly think, on the college basketball note, I think that they're going to have a March Madness this year. So I think that'll happen. So obviously we wish the best to Karl-Anthony Towns and anyone on the Timberwolves, or even Memphis or what other teams they were playing. If they came in contact with COVID, obviously wish them the best. And hopefully we can move forward without any major complications with it. So we had a huge trade in the NBA, and I know this is a Wolves podcast, but we got to talk about it. Any NBA forum needs to talk about it. The James Harden trade to the Brooklyn Nets. And I'll start with you, Donover. What were your initial thoughts of the trade, and who do you think won the trade in your opinion?
If we're going between like the two big teams of Houston and the Nets, I mean, getting 8 first-round picks essentially for James Harden is just an absolute ransom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can just do that so much. You see with OKC now, they can basically just throw picks at whatever problem they want and go get anything, really. The one thing that doesn't really make sense to me, it seems like they're in sell mode, but then they flip LeVert for another pick and get Victor instead. That really doesn't make sense to me. They're kind of playing both sides of the fence on that one.
Yeah, and the fact that the fact with the Westbrook trade, true. I mean, yes, they traded Westbrook, but they got back John Wall. John Wall is not going to want to be on a team that's rebuilding, in my opinion, particularly after he's been out for so long. He's going to want to go straight at it and go for a championship. So kind of a weird scenario there in Houston. But Chris, what did you think of the Chris Harden trade, and what do you think? Who do you think won the trade in the end? Do you think it was Brooklyn? Do you think it was one of the other teams? What do you think?
So, I mean, I look at it a little differently. I see those picks that Houston got as pretty worthless. I mean, they got picks in 2022 from Milwaukee and Brooklyn. So both of those picks you can pretty much guarantee are late firsts, which means you're giving a guaranteed contract to a guy that might barely make your roster. So that's a lot of times a first-round pick that teams don't even want. They'd rather have a second-round pick where you can get a similar quality guy. You're taking a crapshoot, and you don't have to guarantee him any money. They also get the 2024 and 2026. By then, they might get interesting. I mean, this could turn into what Brooklyn did in the KG era, because 2024 and 2026, at that point, Durant and Harden and Kyrie all need to be on another contract. So they're really gambling that none of those guys are going to stay. And it's possible, but you also got to realize this is New York, and it's turning into the prime team in New York, where if they don't stay, and if they hear they're not going to stay, they're going to flip those for more assets. So I don't see the Nets being bad. So I don't see those picks being anything even in the lottery, more or less high lottery. So the pick swaps are also kind of pointless because, I mean, when you're trading away a Hall of Famer in his prime and getting back Oladipo, who is just a one-year rental, you're going to be bad. So you're not going to swap your pick with, a team that's better than you. So, I mean, to me, what it looks like Houston did was just dumped salary cap. I mean, they get some flexibility with the picks, which they'll be able to move around and, play the game the same way that they got rid of Harden. They might be able to target some player on someone else's team and give these same picks to them and try to bolster it that way. But what I think Houston's doing is trying to get in the market for the free agent class next year and build a whole new team from scratch based off a free agent superstar. But the real winners in my mind are the Pacers and the Cavs. I mean, the Pacers flipped Oladipo, who's making $20 million, not quite the guy he used to be, and they get LeVert on a 3-year good deal. That guy's a stud. And then the Cavs toss in the Milwaukee Bucks pick, which is going to be, 28th this year or something like that? And they get Jared Allen, who's a stud. I mean, he's going to be up for a contract, so they're going to have to pay him, but they're also going to lose Drummond this year. So they're going to flip him and try to get something, and they already got their young center built up. So, I mean, those two teams, I mean, everyone laughs at cap space and stuff like that, saying it's not worth it. But when big deals like this come out, having that cap space is huge because you can, stick your little hand in there and grab a good player for nothing.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the Andre Drummond thing. Definitely a player like Jared Allen, who's a little younger, meets the Cavs timeline anyway. I mean, right. I mean, Andre Drummond, he's not going to be there long term. There's no way he sticks around in Cleveland. Although Kevin Love did, but
that's because they can't get rid of him.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Probably the worst contract in the NBA.
Which is sad to say because I don't know. I feel like Kevin Love's such a good guy, and I feel like Cleveland loves him, but yeah, it's definitely a bad contract. So rumors came out today. One more thing I want to mention. I feel like now the Wolves are obviously the 15th seed right now. Things aren't looking great. Cat just got COVID. But I think in a small way, this move kind of helps the Wolves in a way. I mean, because it weakens the Rockets. It's really as simple as that. Get James Harden out of the East And I think it's as simple as that. So speaking of the Rockets, I was seeing some rumors today of a potentially Rosas talking to the Houston front office, which of course he knows well because he used to work there, of PJ Tucker moves. Now, and I'm going to start with you, Chris. Do you want PJ Tucker on this team, and what do you think the Wolves would have to give up to get him? And do you think he's worth what they'd have to give up?
So the Ringer came out a couple of days ago, and they said a lot of teams were sniffing around Tucker, and they said the perceived value is 3 second-round picks.
Okay.
That's not terrible.
No.
But he's also up for a contract, and he turned down the contract from Houston. So who knows what Houston offered him, and maybe he just doesn't want to stay in Houston because he sees a sinking ship. Do I want Tucker? Do I want Tucker over what we have right now? Sure. Yeah, I think he would be better. Would I take Tucker on a similar deal than we did Ed Davis? $5 million? That's probably about what I would pay him. He's 35 years old. I mean, yes, he's physical and all that, but he's 6'6". Like, he's still 6'6". He's not grabbing 10 rebounds a game at 6'6". He is a good man defender. I mean, he would be like a super powered rich man's James Johnson to me, where he's a great locker room guy. He'll get some toughness, but he's not who you want to build this franchise around at the 4 spot moving forward. So, I mean, if it's a handful of seconds, that's fine because our team's young enough. I'm usually an asset guy. I'm usually a draft pick guy. I'm a build for the future guy. But there comes a point in your team where it's like, we've got enough youth. So I'd be fine giving up some youth for a nice veteran presence. But, we'll see.
Yeah, and Donovan, what do you think of the potential of PJ Tucker coming to this team?
I like what PJ Tucker brings to the table. I think he would be a really nice, consistent presence next to Cat defensively. We saw it with Taj Gibson. When you put a good defensive big next to Cat, he plays a lot better. And obviously with the Karl Anthony Towns we saw through the first 2 games and his last 2 games back, and his renewed I don't even know what the word I'm looking for here is, but
defensive ability.
Defensive ability, yeah. And you've really seen it, especially man-to-man defense. If you can add a guy like PJ Tucker there next to him, I think you got to do it, especially for 3 seconds. That's nothing.
Yeah, and I agree. I would not – I personally, I don't value second-round picks in too high of lights. Just in general, I don't think they – well, it's not like the NFL where you can get like a Dalvin Cook a lot of times in the second round. Of course, it's a lot different. But, I would definitely make the move. It does, like you were saying, scare me that he's a little undersized. He's only 6 – you were saying 6'6". I actually looked it up. He's only 6'5". So give up an inch there. He is 35. I believe he was taken in 2006 or something like that. So he's old, but I think the team to make a PJ Tucker kind of move, they got to look themselves in the face and decide, are they a contender or are they just trying to build up a young core? I think that's the decision that the Rosas needs to decide, particularly, I mean, let's say Towns is out. Let's say best case scenario, Towns doesn't have any effect from COVID. He's fine. I mean, he's still out. He probably misses 3 or 4 more games. What if those are all losses? Is it worth it?
They are all losses if Cat's out. I'll tell you right now, they're all losses and probably by 20 points.
I mean, the Spurs game did happen. We did get the win against them, but I think the Wolves got to look themselves in the face and decide, is PJ are we contenders, and should we even go forward with this? But we got to talk about the Timberwolves here, kind of their play on the courts. That was a very bad. The Wolves had another one, and we've talked about it on the show before. The Wolves had another one of their bad quarters where they play well for 75 to 80% of the game, and then they blow it in either the fourth quarter or in the Portland game, it was the second quarter. So I'm going to put it like this, Donover, the loss against Memphis. Who is most to blame on this team? Who do we blame the loss on the most? I know there's a bunch of people you can blame it on, but who would you blame the collapse against Memphis on?
As much as I want to put the accountability on the players on the floor, I have to put this one on Saunders. We keep seeing the same thing game after game when they go through the lulls, and the same thing keeps happening. He's not setting up his rotations properly. We're running out Culver, Okogie, just a bunch of non-shooters together, and we just start bricking shots, and it just gets contagious, and we just can't hit a bucket. I think we need to run more actions for Cat in that situation. He needs to stagger his rotations a little bit better, and we have to change up something defensively in those situations. It really just seems like they just pick and roll us to death. They find the guy they want to screen, and they just continue to beat it down and down. And Saunders really needs to come up with an adjustment on that.
Okay, and then Chris, who would you blame the loss on? Just the person you blame it the most on. Do you think it's Saunders? Do you think it's a player? Who do you think?
Partially I want to say it's Rosas, but he's only been here for a year and a half, and it's not NBA 2K. You can't flip a whole terrible roster in a year and a half.
Right.
So, to me, I agree with the coaching right now. It's hard to say that because we looked like we were doing so well through three quarters, but it's called adjustments, and that's what they did. They made an adjustment when they saw our lineup that I think was Rubio, Edwards, Culver, Vanderbilt, and Cat. So we had one real shooter because Edwards isn't shooting right now. Mm-hmm. And what did they do? They went zone on us, and they made us shoot. Well, we couldn't. It didn't work. We kept trying to run the same action. The game before, we were running these motion actions where guys were flying around the three-point line, taking handoffs. Like that kind of action would have confused his zone, would have made it chasing. And we just didn't do any of that. And then in the fourth quarter, or late third, fourth quarter, they went to trapping all of our ball handlers when we pick and roll. So that made us, that made the roll or the point guard dish it to someone and him make a decision. Well, we had no one out there that could make a decision. That's why we ended up having to put Rubio back in the fourth. But we couldn't get out of this. We couldn't get out of our own way. And that kind of thing is something you have to adjust for. But on the simplest level, we're playing against a team that's huge, and guess what? The next games, if they happen, we've got Atlanta, which has got Collins and Capella. We got Orlando, which is Vucevic and Gordon, Zion and Adams. We got huge teams coming up. And if we keep playing these small lineups, we're going to get crushed. 80 points in the paint we gave up.
Yeah.
You can't do that, and Vanderbilt didn't foul out. I know he was in foul trouble, but if we're that short on big men, he's going to foul out. I'm going to let him play till he fouls out. Mm-hmm. And Naz Reid played 14 minutes. Naz has been one of the better surprises this year. Not surprises. I expected him to play well, but he's playing way better than an undrafted guy in his second year, and he's got size. Like, play him next to Cat if we need to, if we're getting crushed inside. Like, sometimes you have to step away from your plan and you need to pivot. And it was time to pivot, to make a move, and we didn't.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So I'm going to do a follow-up in you. This can be kind of a quick answer kind of thing. Do you think that Ryan Saunders should be relieved of his duties as coach? And we'll start with you, Chris. What do you think it's time to make a move already?
I I would say no, not this year. I don't think it's going to help. I don't think you can do that in the middle of the year, especially this crazy year. And I also don't. I mean, as bad as I think he's done this year, he's also not been given very, very good cards to play. Again, he literally doesn't have a power forward on the roster. And, you know, that's not going to help. He had Cat, who's been out most of the games. That doesn't help. He's had half his rosters new or, you know, basically new, has never played together. They had no time for practice preseason. I mean, I don't know what kind of offense you can put in when you've got 2 weeks to put it all in while you're trying to get guys in shape, but it can't be very good. I don't know. I don't think it would work. But, I mean, if all of a sudden, you know, Brett Brown said he's looking to coach, I think I would sniff around it. I mean, if you can find a great coach, but they're all coaching their teams right now too. So
that's true.
I think it would be time to let it play out, see what Rosas does in the offseason and at the trade deadline this year. Who knows? But I do think that we shouldn't be sold on this guy. I mean, like we've said in other podcasts, he hasn't earned, in my opinion, he didn't earn his way up the ranks to get this job. So it's not like he is owed anything. There's, you know, there's 30 some of these jobs in the world to coach in the NBA. And there's probably 100 more qualified candidates. Not saying he can't be good, but there's other guys that are more qualified than him. And I don't think that we should be locked into him long-term.
And Donovan, what do you think? Do you think it's time to pull the plug, or should we let it play out?
I think we should let it play out. As much as I would love to overreact to what we've seen so far, I think Chris hit the nail on the head with that. We've had Cat, 4 games now. We've based everything around him. Can't scrap that mid-season. And also, I think a really underplayed part is Cat really likes Ryan Saunders. And I think right now, taking another person away from Cat isn't probably our best idea.
Yeah. I would tend to agree as well, particularly like you said, it's a weird season. You don't want to throw off the chemistry more than it already has. They're just trying to build chemistry. So I think he should be on somewhat of a short leash, but I don't think it should be a love affair over him, but I don't think that they should get rid of him. So someone who did not have a good game, and for the second game in a row against Memphis, was Anthony Edwards. 17 minutes, 2 points, 3 rebounds. And now I know that he's young. Okay, he's only 19 years old. He was a freshman when he came out of college, but he hasn't played well since and we haven't done a show since then, but since his mistake against San Antonio, which I just wrote off as just, hey, it's a rookie mistake, whatever. We'll move forward from this. It'll be fine. Do you, and I'll start with you, Donovan, do you think that what happened at the end of the San Antonio game is still haunting Anthony Edwards? And do you think that's the reason that he's not playing well right now, or do you think it's something else?
I do think it's haunting him. You can kind of see it, especially like during warm-ups and during the games. He doesn't look like he's having as much fun as he was earlier in the season. And I think that kind of plays back to over the last 2 to 3 games, his jumper is not falling. I think his confidence really rises and falls with his jumper. He loves his jumper, which same with Andrew Wiggins. I think we need to get what we got through with Wiggins that last year to quit falling in love with that long two. Luckily, Anthony Edwards doesn't shoot very many of those, but he just loves to take that 3. Like I said, premature. He's been on the team for less than 3 months. Less than 3 months now. Edwards takes about 43 of his shots from 3, 43% of his shots from 3, and 34 within 3 feet. I want to see those numbers flip. He can get to the rim whenever he wants. I think getting to the rim and finishing at the rim will really help his confidence. He's shooting 60% from 3 feet in and 26% from 3. I mean, just looking at the numbers, I don't see why he just doesn't attack the rim almost every time he gets it. I think we need to run some more sets for him as well.
And then Chris, what do you think is wrong with Anthony Edwards? Do you think it's the mistake compiling, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't even really think that was a mistake. I listened to Sam Mitchell talk about it. I think it was him. And he said, he made the right move. He made an immediate drive after the guy ran out at him. And the whole bench, I guess, was yelling 3-3-3, which, that's why he passed it. He was going to dunk, he said. And D'Lo was streaming down open. And if he would have just took a couple steps to his right, D'Lo would have been wide open for a corner three. And it might have been one of those plays where you're like, wow, this rookie's got it. There's one thing that I love about Edwards right now is his passing. I mean, when he gets to the hole, he's not always looking to shoot. Sometimes he's looking to pass more than he should, but he's definitely making good passes. What I think his problem is not to harp on coach, but what is his role right now? Like, what is his role? I mean, you've got a guy like Ball in Charlotte where, he comes in, he runs the second unit. He's got his little alley-oop buddy in there. I mean, he knows what he's doing. Wiseman knows what he's doing. He's like the fourth man. He's going to his little pick and rolls. He's going to clean up the garbage, all that kind of stuff. Edwards is just kind of floating around, doesn't really have a role. So I think that might be part of it. The NBA is now maybe starting to look more like a job. When he first came in, it was just the fun and the lights, and he was playing like a kid in the playground, which he is. I mean, he skipped his senior year in high school to go to college, so he's basically a freshman in college age right now. So I mean, I think there's no reason to worry about it, but I think he does need to find a role, and I think it's on Saunders to get that locked in. And there's been that talk about him maybe playing some power forward, which sounds crazy, but he's the third heaviest guy in the team. And, when he's locked in on somebody defensively, man to man, I think he's looked good. When he's playing off the ball, he's looked terrible. So maybe, challenge him and say, hey, guard this big guy. He's a physical guy with a lot of confidence. That might just be enough to spark him and give him that drive to compete a little harder. I think he just needs to know what his role is.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I think to your point, I think a lot of the Timberwolves, just other than like the point guards, are just kind of floating out there, not knowing exactly what they're supposed to do or what their role is. And I think that's a big issue with Saunders and the team in general. So something that I noticed from this last Timberwolves game against Memphis is I feel like no one is boxing out. Like you said, they gave up 80 points in the paint. And there were a lot of times where Valanciunas, someone on Memphis would put up a three-pointer and just Valanciunas would be right next to the basket, ready for an offensive rebound, and no one would put a body on him. How do you think the Wolves can rebound the ball better? Is it simply just guys like Towns and Vanderbilt who wasn't in the game, or in Juancho just boxing out, or do you think there's more to it? Let's start with you, Chris.
I mean, you want to say it's toughness or you got to try hard, but the other team's trying hard too, and the other team's tough too. To me, it comes down to personnel. There's guys that have it in them to attack the rim, and there's guys that don't. We have a lot of guys that don't. And the guys that do like to attack the rim and do like to rebound are Malik Beasley. Jared Culver's been doing a good job at it. One of the few things he's done well, maybe the only thing he's done well. And Vanderbilt and Cat, obviously. But like a lot of those guys, like probably our best rebounders are our point guards and our guards. I mean, Rubio's always been a high level rebounder. D'Lo's a decent rebounder. We just don't have the personnel. I mean, it comes down to that. And I don't want to harp on the personnel because I know this isn't a finished product. Like we didn't even want really Juancho. Like Juancho wanted 10 plus million a year in free agency, and we told him go find that deal and come back to us, and he didn't. Meanwhile, we went after, speaking of the Harden trade and what it might open up, we went after Larry Nance Jr., who's on Cleveland, who might end up, being a piece that might be moved now that they're getting other pieces. So we went after Larry Nance to see what he would cost. We went after Aaron Gordon. We went after who's a high flyer out in Portland right now.
Derek Jones Jr.
Derek Jones Jr. Yep. We went after him. We went after Millsap. So like we actively try to get different power forwards in. None of those guys clicked or the deals didn't work. So we slid like, okay, we'll give you this backup money, Wancho, because we were over the cap anyways. So we might as well pay somebody so he can be a trade asset. So I would say until after the trade deadline, you're looking at what you got. We've got a lot of flaws. We've got a guy like Ed Davis who might be able to rebound but do nothing else. Or you got a guy like Wancho, who hopefully will get back to being a 35% three-point shooter, where that's an asset, but he's not going to rebound. I think we're just going to be bad rebounders, And unfortunately, last game we were also bad in transition. So you're either going to play, if you play small, you better be good on transition, because you can't rebound. We were bad in both.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Donovan, anything to add to that? How can we improve our rebounding?
Again, Chris just kind of nailed exactly what I was thinking. We just don't have the personnel to do it. Obviously, a big problem with last night was Vanderbilt and foul trouble. He a good rebounder for us, and with Anthony Edwards, if we can get him out there and define his role, he's a plus rebounder as well this far in his career. Just really throw bodies at it.
What were you going to say, Chris?
There's no reason why Edwards, in a perfect world, when he's playing the three at his size and athletic ability, shouldn't be getting, 5-6 rebounds a game. Like we should be able to rebound as a team very well. I mean, Beasley's been doing it. Edwards needs to do it. And we just need that guy to get 7 boards a game as a power forward, and we just don't have it.
So I totally agree with what you were saying there. So what I want to move to, I feel like D'Lo has been having some good games lately, but Rubio hasn't really been great for us. I mean, we're paying him $17 million to be our backup point guard, and I feel like he's not performing in the way. Donovan, what do you think of the Rubio D'Lo backcourt, and what do you? It seems like they're playing on the court together a lot. What do you think? Do you think it can work, or do you think they're two polar opposites that it won't work? And who do you think should be the main ball handler as well?
Coming into the season, watching Rubio with Mitchell and Booker, I thought, this looks like a match made in heaven. Rubio can facilitate, get easy buckets for D'Angelo. But what we've seen so far is what gets D'Angelo going is running a pick and roll and getting in rhythm. Shooting his floaters, those elbow jumpers, and his three-point game. I think we got to put Ricky in a defined backup point guard role, let him run the second team, maybe try to get another shooter down there with him, because if we put him with Culver and Vanderbilt, like Ricky's not going to flourish in that role. We need to surround Ricky with shooters around him, or else he's just kicking to Culver or Koji, and they're just bricking threes. Yeah,
I totally agree. And Chris, you've kind of said in the past who you think should be the main ball handler, but how do you think that the Rubio D'Lo backcourt is going so far? And what do you think the outlook for it is moving forward?
I mean, just like Donovan said, like it made sense. Like it should work, but it's not. And part of it might be that when Rubio's game is clicking, and when Rubio is doing his Rubio thing, which he's elite at doing the things he does, it is counterproductive for D'Lo to be elite at what D'Lo's elite at, like you said. So it's tough. Obviously, Rubio is the odd man out in that situation, and I'm comfortable with that because, D'Lo is the guy that has the max star potential type outcome. But Rubio's also started every game of his life. And, when he's been successful, it's been running teams full of talent. He's the type of guy that makes every talented person around him better.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also the type of guy that if he's around untalented guys, he makes them almost worse. Or maybe not worse, but definitely it makes the whole he doesn't make up for their lack of talent, so I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. And I love Ricky Rubio. He's one of my 3 favorite Timberwolves of all time, I would say. But you also have to be knowledgeable enough to know that this isn't working. Like you said, you can't roll with Okogie, Layman, and Vanderbilt and Edwards when he's not hitting and think that that's going to work. It's just not the kind of drink that he stirs. So we need to probably look at Rubio in a different light, and maybe the same light that Rosas looked at this. What I think half of the Rubio deal was locker room Rubio, which I think is good. He's been the guy coming out saying, we're not playing well. The whole team's, dogging it. He said even himself has been playing bad. So he's taking blame. But I think what we need to look at it is like Rosas probably did is I think they floated James Johnson around that expiring contract and maybe a first or maybe Culver or something, and they weren't getting any action back. That wasn't bringing in any trades. So he said, well, I'm going to extend this $17 million trade asset one more year. And I think that's what Rubio is going to be. I think Rubio's main value to this team, other than, maybe a locker room guy, a veteran, an adult in the locker room, is $17 million to help match a larger contract. I don't think on the court it's going to work, which is crazy to say because he was so damn good in the bubble. He was dominant in the bubble. Like he was on some list of some of the better players that were in the bubble, period. He made it work. And that was 3 months ago. He was fast. He was, in and out on defense. He was hitting his shots. He was creating for everyone. And he's doing none of that right now. I just don't understand it. He's mentioned he's out of shape and he's getting back in shape. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's an emotional thing. He's been a starter his whole life. Now he's been the last 2 teams have kicked him to the curb. Now he comes to the Timberwolves, who have another point guard that's kicking him to the curb. Maybe it's a mental thing where he's just depressed at being, now the second fiddle when he's used to being since 14 years old, the lead dog.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's definitely not working. But it's 11 games into a 72 game season, so who knows?
Yeah, and I think that, like you were saying, he's got to have shooters around him. Like he's not going to do anything with like Culver, Vanderbilt, even Anthony Edwards, as hard as it is to say. He hasn't been shooting well. So Rubio thrives in a situation where he has shooters around him, where Rubio can just cut through the paint, make the defense kind of drop to him, and then he can dish it out to someone to hit a three, which is kind of where the NBA is going. But I think the problem is we just don't have those kind of players on our bench with the second unit that they can play with. But yes, when he's with Malik Beasley has been great lately. He's been hitting threes. D'Lo, of course, can shoot, but what I thought was interesting was, and we were talking about it, even when D'Lo and Rubio are in there at the same time, D'Lo's still taking the ball up the court. Like it's that Rubio's playing off the ball a lot. Now I feel like that doesn't suit him whatsoever.
It should be the other way.
Yeah, right. because D'Lo's the one who can shoot. So yeah, I think they should switch it up. So one thing that we're 3-8 right now. So we are 11 games into the season. And obviously we went into the season. I made a video on my channel saying, hey, I think that we're going to be the 8th seed or something this year. Not feeling so good about that right now. Obviously Towns got COVID, so he could be out 10 days at the very least. We're 3-8. We're worst in the West, and things should start looking good. So we'll start with you, Chris. What are the realistic expectations for what should be the realistic expectations for this team going forward? Is it still like to sneak into the playoffs, or is that a pipe dream? What do you think, Chris?
I think, it's such a soft answer, but I think it is the last 20 games of the season, last 30 games. I want to be 500 for those 30 games. Like by the end of the year, I want to be like, okay, we're going in the right direction. But the problem is if we keep playing the way we're playing, those last 30 games might be very important to not be 500. Our first round pick is top 3 protected. I don't think that we're going to, even if we get the number 1 pick, I would be very surprised if we keep it, or maybe we keep that and trade Edwards or something. But I don't think we need to add another high school kid on this roster, saying high school, basically. But it's going to be tough. I think there's going to be a real long look to decide, are we going to try to win as many games as we can, or are we going to try to quote unquote develop the youth, AKA tank? It's going to be interesting to see which way this goes. I personally, as a fan, I just want to see decent basketball. Every game that Cat's played in has been good. By good, I mean, we've been in it. We've looked good. We've fallen apart like in the fourth quarter last game, but we were looking good the whole game. The problem is we were looking really good and only up 1 or 2, which means, we were also turning the ball over and playing bad. But I just want to see some competitive basketball. As long as it's not blowouts, I would be perfectly fine if we lose almost all the games, but we lose them by 2 and nail biters. Like, I just want to see basketball where people are developing. I want to see Anthony Edwards look like it wasn't a mistake. And by no means am I saying it's a mistake this early. I think that's ridiculous. But I want to see him the last 30 games, shooting 35% from 3, getting to the line 6 times a game. I want to see development. I want to see the system look like it's the right system. Wins and losses don't really matter to me right now.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. And Donovan, what do you think? What should be the realistic expectations for this team going forward?
Coming into the season, I said I expected them to be around that 9-10 seed coming in, competing for the play-in game. I think you kind of need that with the nucleus you have in place with Cat and D'Lo's age. Like, they need to start producing wins. And that's all I really care about at this point. I think they should be close to 500 down the stretch, especially with Cat playing. If Cat continues to stay involved, especially defensively, that's a complete game and franchise changer. If Cat finally commits to defense and they can put someone around him, and we can, Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, like you were saying, I don't want to be terrible anymore. I feel like this team is too good to be terrible. And it's hard to see us, and some of it's its own fault, but it's hard to see us waste Karl Anthony Towns' prime like this. Like, right. It's really disappointing to see it, and I hope it doesn't continue. Well, guys, I think that's about it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, it's been fun. Let's get some wins. Like you said, we got to get some wins. Right. Absolutely. Let's see. Let's take a look at the schedule for this week. Obviously, tonight's game was canceled. Yeah. How many do they scrap?
That's true. That's true. So we got the Hawks coming up. We got you were saying the Magic coming up, and then
we got Hawks, Magic, Hawks, Pelicans, Golden State, Sixers.
Okay, well, I would say they're winnable, but without Cat, who knows? I mean, who knows going forward? But thanks so much, guys, for joining me. And this has been another episode of the Everything's Coming Up Timberwolves podcast.